Kalen, a tall and lean alien warrior, paced across the empty clearing outside his small dome-shaped home. His pale skin glowed faintly in the moonlight, a characteristic of his albino race, and his sharp eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, as if expecting his 3 small hatchlings to suddenly appear. But they were gone. For weeks, Kalen had been frantic. His hatchlings, the young ones he had carefully raised since they hatched, had disappeared without a trace. Their usual chirps, which filled the dome with life, had vanished. The nests he had built for them were empty. It was as if the ground itself had swallowed them. The thought made his chest tighten. He stopped pacing and knelt by the cold, smooth floor, his long fingers brushing over the faint marks of tiny claws. They were still here, he realized, signs that they had been here. But now they were gone. His mind raced. Had some predator taken them? Or worse, had they wandered too far and been captured by humans? The humans were always curious about albino hatchlings, and Kalen knew the stories. He remembered the first day they hatched. The small creatures had been fragile, their soft white scales almost translucent under the light of their nest. Kalen had spent nights watching over them, feeding them tiny amounts of nutrient gel, teaching them how to chirp, how to flap their tiny wings, and how to respond to his commands. He had been patient, careful, and gentle with them, despite his fierce reputation as a warrior. Now that careful upbringing seemed wasted. The emptiness in the dome pressed against him, heavier than any armor he had worn in battle. Kalen could feel the anger and fear rising together. "Where are you?" he whispered to the silence. The forest beyond his dome stood tall and dark, a place full of unknown dangers, but also possibly full of answers. He had called out for them every day, flying low over the trees with his long, pale wings spread wide, but there was never a response. No chirps, no tiny flutters in the leaves. Nothing. Weeks had passed. Kalen's frustration had grown into desperation. His hatchlings were not just children, they were the future of his kind. Losing them meant more than just pain. It meant failure. The warrior gathered his gear. A long curved blade rested at his hip, sharp and polished. He strapped a small pack across his back containing the essentials: nutrient gel for the hatchlings, a few water pods, and a communicator he rarely used. Tonight he would go out into the human settlements. Humans had always been nearby, quiet in their small towns and villages, but sometimes one of them would cross into the alien territory. Most were harmless, but some were reckless. Kalen could not ignore the possibility that one of them had taken the hatchlings, either out of curiosity or carelessness. As he moved, the ground beneath his feet crunched softly. His senses, sharper than any humans, detected the faint traces of life. Tiny footprints, different from his own or any wild creature's, led away from the clearing. His chest tightened with hope. Maybe they had not been taken far. Maybe they were still alive. Flying low over the forest, Kalen noticed small disturbances in the undergrowth: broken branches, crushed leaves, and faint traces of tiny claws. They matched his hatchling's size perfectly. Relief and worry twisted together inside him. Relief that they were alive, worry about what dangers they might face alone. As he followed the trail, he remembered the first time he had ventured close to the human villages. The humans had seemed strange and fragile. Their voices were soft, almost musical, but sometimes they were unpredictable. He had watched from a distance before, never daring to approach, but desperation had no fear. He had to find his hatchlings. The moon rose higher, casting pale light over the trees. Kalen's sharp eyes caught movement ahead. He landed quietly, behind a large bush, and peered through the branches. There, a small human girl, no older than 12 cycles of the moon, crouched near a fallen log. She seemed unaware of him, focused entirely on something in her arms. Kalen's heart thudded. Could it be? He crouched lower, keeping silent. In the dim light, he saw 3 small white forms, their scales almost glowing against the human's dark clothing. His hatchlings. They were alive, safe in the girl's arms. For a moment, Kalen could not believe it. He had feared they were lost forever, or worse, harmed by predators. But there they were, chirping softly and nuzzling the girl's warmth. The girl looked gentle, careful, and kind. She whispered soft words, and the hatchlings responded, curling into her hands without fear. Kalen's first instinct was to step forward, to claim his children and return them to the dome immediately. But something held him back. The scene before him was calm, peaceful even. His hatchlings were not crying or scared. They were content, even happy. They had found comfort with this human. He remained hidden, watching. The girl spoke to them softly, laughing quietly as one hatchling attempted to flap its tiny wings. She helped it steady itself, her fingers delicate and precise. Kalen's anger softened slightly. He realized that this human had not harmed them. She had cared for them, feeding them, keeping them safe. Despite relief, Kalen could not ignore the worry gnawing at him. Humans were unpredictable. How long before someone else discovered them? How long before curiosity or fear caused trouble? He had to intervene, but carefully. His hatchlings were small, fragile, and still learning about the world. Any sudden action might frighten them. The girl, sensing no danger, finally laid the hatchlings in a small nest she had made from soft leaves and cloth. They curled together, sleeping peacefully. Kalen could hear their soft breathing and feel their warmth even from a distance. His chest ached with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something he had not expected, admiration for the girl. He realized that this human had risked a lot to protect his hatchlings. She had not just found them, she had nurtured them when he could not. For weeks, she had been their guardian without asking for anything in return. That thought filled him with respect, but also with a quiet fear. Could he trust her? Could he leave his hatchlings here? Kalen took a deep breath, steadying himself. The forest around him seemed quieter now, as if it too waited for his next move. He knew he had to speak to the girl, to understand why she had taken in his hatchlings and what she planned to do. He could not leave without answers. As he stepped forward carefully, a branch snapped underfoot. The girl's head lifted, her eyes wide as they met his. For a moment, neither spoke. Kalen's imposing form and pale skin seemed to glow in the moonlight, and the girl froze, clutching one of the hatchlings to her chest. I was just trying to keep them safe, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Kalen's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. He took another cautious step forward. They are mine, he said, his voice low but firm. They belong with me. The girl nodded quickly, tears forming in her eyes. I know. I didn't want them to be hurt. I didn't know where else to take them. For the first time, Kalen felt a pang of understanding. His hatchlings were small, fragile, and vulnerable. They had needed care, and the girl had provided it when he could not. He realized that anger would not solve this problem. Not completely. He needed to approach this carefully for the sake of his hatchlings. He crouched down, keeping his movements slow and calm. The hatchlings stirred in their small nest, but did not panic. They recognized him and chirped softly as if asking why he had been gone for so long. Kalen's heart clenched. He knelt beside the girl, his eyes scanning her face. Why did you take them? He asked again, but with less sharpness. The girl looked at him, her small hands resting gently on the hatchlings. I found them alone, lost, and I couldn't just leave them. I didn't know you would come looking so soon. Kalen remained silent for a moment, watching his children sleep. He could see the softness in their tiny movements, the way they relaxed completely in the girl's presence. It was clear that she had cared for them well. He made a decision. For now he would observe. He would not take them back immediately. He needed to understand this human, and he needed to understand why his hatchlings had bonded so quickly with her. There was something about this girl. Her patience, her care, her courage that he did not expect even in humans. As the moon climbed higher, casting silver light over the clearing, Kalen stayed crouched beside the small nest. He knew that the days ahead would be difficult. He had to learn to trust this human, even as he remained vigilant. And he had to Next morning, Kalen awoke just as the first rays of the twin suns touched the forest canopy. His thoughts were heavy. He had spent the night observing the human girl, watching her interact with his albino hatchlings. She had been patient, gentle, and careful, never raising her voice or moving too quickly. The hatchlings had curled closer to her, chirping softly as she stroked their tiny scales. Kalen knew he had to speak to her properly. Last night, the brief encounter had shown him something unexpected. His hatchlings trusted her. That trust was fragile, and he could not risk scaring them away or undoing the bond they had formed. He rose silently, careful not to disturb the hatchlings, and followed the faint path the girl had taken deeper into the forest. The girl was already awake, kneeling by a shallow stream where the hatchlings were drinking. Her dark hair fell loosely around her face, and her simple, earth-toned clothing was practical for moving quietly through. Days passed in the quiet forest clearing where Kalen had chosen to stay. The hatchlings, now growing stronger and more confident, played around their new home. They chirped and flapped their tiny wings, exploring every corner of the area. The girl whose name Kalen had learned was Alara continued to care for them, always gentle, always patient. Kalen could not deny the bond they shared. He had expected to reclaim his hatchlings and return to his mission of raising them to be strong, capable leaders of their kind. But the longer he watched Alara with them, the more he questioned whether he had been too hasty. One evening, after the hatchlings had settled down for the night, Kalen sat by the edge of the clearing, his eyes on the stars above. The soft chirps of the hatchlings filled the air, and Alara was beside them, brushing her fingers through the soft scales of one of the little ones. Kalen turned his gaze to her. "Alara," he began, his voice low but steady. "Why did you choose to protect them? You have your own life, your own people. Why risk so much for creatures that are not your own?" Alara looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know," she said quietly. I saw them alone, scared. They reminded me of something I've always felt. Lost. But I knew, deep down, I couldn't just walk away from them." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "When you care about something, you don't think about the consequences. You just do what's right." Kalen felt a flicker of something unfamiliar in his chest. It was admiration, but also confusion. He had never considered the human way of thinking, the way they acted based on emotions rather than duty or strength. To Kalen, that was something rare, perhaps even something beautiful. "There is much I don't understand about your people," Kalen said, his voice softening. "But I know this much. You have a strength I did not expect." Alara smiled faintly, a bit shy. "Strength? I'm just me." "No," Kalen said firmly. "You are more than just you. You have shown a strength that many warriors do not have. Your patience, your care. It is something rare." She seemed surprised by his words. "I never thought about it like that. I just wanted to help them, the hatchlings. I didn't want them to suffer alone." Kalen watched her for a long time, considering her words. His mind raced with questions he didn't know how to ask. He had always been trained to fight, to protect with strength and force. He had never been taught the value of kindness, of quiet support. But here, with Alara and the hatchlings, he saw it in action. "They trust you," he said quietly. "More than I ever thought possible." Alara's gaze turned toward the hatchlings, who were now curled up in their nest, their soft bodies rising and falling with each breath. "I know they're not afraid of me, they never were." Kalen felt a pang of guilt, a deep ache that he hadn't expected. He had been so focused on strength, on survival, that he hadn't realized how much his hatchlings needed something more. They needed comfort, care, and trust, things he had never thought to give them. "That's because you are kind to them," Kalen said. "That is something I could never give them." Alara looked at him, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? Kaelin shifted uncomfortably. I was raised to be strong, to lead by force, but I see now that my hatchlings need more than strength to grow. They need someone who understands them, who knows what they feel. I never considered that. I thought they would learn strength first, not comfort. Ilara studied him for a long moment. But strength is important too, right? You've protected them. You've kept them safe from harm. Kaelin nodded slowly. Yes, that is true. But strength alone is not enough. They need guidance. They need to feel safe in this world, to know that they are not just surviving but living. Ilara's eyes softened as she looked at the hatchlings. They've been through so much already, but they're so strong. They've grown so much since I found them. Kaelin's heart swelled with pride as he watched his children. They were small, but they were strong in their own way. They had learned to adapt, to trust, and to grow under Ilara's care. Perhaps in a way, she had been the missing piece he didn't know they needed. I never wanted to take them away from you, Kaelin admitted. But I also knew they could not stay with a human forever. They are mine to raise, to protect. Ilara nodded, her expression serious. I understand, but I don't want to lose them, Kaelin. They've become like family to me. Kaelin stood up, walking toward her and the hatchlings. He paused for a moment, looking down at the small creatures, nestled together. They had found safety in her care, and in a way, so had he. He had learned something in these past few weeks, something he had never expected. Ilara, he said quietly, I don't know what to do. My instincts tell me to take them back, to raise them as I was raised. But my heart tells me that they need more than that. They need more than just strength. They need someone who understands them. Ilara smiled softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'll always be here for them, Kaelin. I'll never stop caring for them. But I know they're your responsibility too. You are their father. They belong with you. Kaelin felt the weight of her words, and it was as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The truth was clear now. He had to find a way to balance his strength with the care his hatchlings needed. I don't want to take them away from you, Ilara, Kaelin said. But I will take them with me, to train them, to prepare them for the future. I need your help, though. They respond to you. I cannot raise them alone. Ilara looked at him, her expression both relieved and sad. Of course, Kaelin, I will help you, whatever it takes. Kaelin took a deep breath, feeling a surge of gratitude toward the girl who had cared for his hatchlings when he couldn't. She had taught him something invaluable, that strength was important, but so was kindness. Both were needed to raise strong leaders, strong beings capable of surviving in a harsh world. You are more than just a caretaker, Ilara, Kaelin said, his voice thick with emotion. You are their protector, their guide. I have learned much from you. Ilara smiled, her face glowing with warmth. I just want to see them happy. That's all. Kaelin's heart swelled with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Perhaps, he thought, this was what true strength looked like. Not just the ability to fight, but the ability to care, to love, to protect. And as he looked down at the hatchlings, safe and sound, he knew that together they would grow stronger, not just in body, but in heart. The future, he realized, was not just about surviving. It was about thriving together. The night was quiet, save for the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp from the hatchlings. As Kaelin sat beside Ilara, watching over their small family, he knew that whatever the future held, he was no longer alone in it. Together, they would face whatever came their way, and that was a strength he had never known before. The days grew, warmer as spring settled over the forest. The hatchlings, now more agile and curious, continued to thrive under Kaelin and Ilara's watch. Kaelin had become more accustomed to the way things were now. He had never expected to share the responsibility of raising his hatchlings with anyone, let alone a human girl. Yet here they were, living side by side, working together. Kaelin had spent most of his life alone, focused on survival and battle, never stopping to question the way things had always been. But now, with Ilara's help, he found himself thinking about things differently. The hatchlings, once quiet and unsure, had become more confident, playful even, and it was all thanks to the girl who had cared for them when he could not. But as much as Kalen appreciated her presence, something still troubled him. He had never fully trusted humans. His past experiences had taught him that they could be unpredictable, that their curiosity often led to dangerous results. His instincts told him to be cautious, to keep his distance, even though his mind argued otherwise. He couldn't shake the feeling that deep down, his hatchlings did not belong in this world. One evening as the sun began to set, Kalen found himself sitting by the clearing's edge, watching Ilara and the hatchlings as they played. The golden light bathed them in warmth, and for a moment everything seemed perfect. But Kalen couldn't ignore the tightness in his chest. He needed to know where he stood. Ilara approached him, a soft smile on her face. "You've been quiet lately," she said, sitting down beside him. Kalen turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about the future." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The hatchlings," Kalen began, his voice low. "They've grown stronger, more independent. They don't need me as much now. Not in the way I thought they would." Ilara's smile faded and she turned her gaze to the hatchlings. "They'll always need you, Kalen, but they need both of us. You've taught them strength and I've taught them patience. Together we've given them something they would not have had if they were alone." Kalen shifted uncomfortably. "But humans," he trailed off, unsure of how to express the feelings swirling inside him. "I don't trust humans. I've seen too many of my people fall because of their unpredictability. I don't know if I can trust you." Ilara looked at him, her expression softening. "I understand," she said quietly. "I've never been what you expected. I didn't grow up like you, Kalen. I didn't train for battle or survival. But I've done my best to care for them, to make sure they're safe." Kalen's gaze remained distant. "I don't know how to let go," he admitted. The days were passing faster than Kalen had expected. The hatchlings had grown, each one becoming more curious about the world around them. They were still small, but their wings had begun to stretch out, and their small claws were now more confident, grasping at everything they could. Kalen could see their progress every day, and in that he felt a sense of pride. But something else had been growing in him as well, a feeling he wasn't sure how to handle. It was a feeling he had never allowed himself to feel before. Uncertainty. Ilara had proven herself to be invaluable. She had been the calm to his storm, the understanding to his confusion. She had cared for the hatchlings in ways he had never imagined, showing them kindness and patience, qualities that were not taught in the harshness of his homeland. Kalen couldn't deny that she had been a key factor in their growth, and it troubled him. At times, when he watched her and the hatchlings together, he felt a strange mixture of gratitude and doubt. The hatchlings had clearly bonded with her, and they trusted her in ways that even Kalen hadn't expected. Yet as much as he respected her, he couldn't completely let go of his fear that they were still too young, too fragile to face the world outside the safety of the forest. And then there was the matter of his people. Kalen's race had always been fierce, bred for strength and survival, and he had been raised to lead them. His hatchlings were not just his children. They were the future of his kind. But now he wasn't sure what that future should look like. Should he take them back to their homeland, where they would be trained in the ways of their ancestors? Or was there something to be learned from the way Ilara had cared for them, something that he too could learn from? He had spent countless nights in quiet thought, staring at the stars, trying to find answers that seemed to elude him. Ilara had given him time and space, never pressuring him to make a decision. But Kalen could feel the weight of that decision growing heavier every day. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees casting a warm glow over the clearing, Kalen found himself standing at the edge of the forest, watching the hatchlings as they played. Ilara was sitting nearby watching them too, her face peaceful. For a moment, Kalen simply observed, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. He had to decide. It wasn't just about his hatchlings anymore. It was about his future too. The future of his people depended on what he chose to do. He had to make a choice. Would he keep them here with Ilara where they could grow in safety and peace? Or would he take them back to their homeland where they would learn to be warriors, to fight, to survive? "Do you ever wonder," Kalen asked, his voice low, "if we're doing the right thing? If we're doing enough for them?" Ilara glanced up at him, her eyes warm. "What do you mean?" "Are we giving them what they need?" Kalen asked, turning to face her. "You've been so patient with them. You've shown them kindness and care. But maybe they need more. Maybe they need to learn strength the way my people do." Ilara tilted her head, considering his words. "I don't think there's one right way to raise them," she said thoughtfully. "You've taught them strength, I've taught them patience, and together we've given them both. They're learning what they need from us in their own way." Kalen stared at the ground, his thoughts tangled. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to think that this peaceful life, this simple life, was enough for them. But deep down, he knew that his people had always valued strength above all else. His hatchlings needed to be strong, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. They needed to know how to survive in a harsh world, one that wasn't always as kind as Ilara's. "I've been thinking about taking them back to our homeland," Kalen said finally. "I think they need more than this. They need to be trained, to understand the ways of our people. They need to learn the history of our kind, the traditions that have kept us alive for centuries. They need to understand what it means to be warriors." Ilara's expression softened. "I understand," she said quietly. "But I also think you're underestimating them. They're still young. They're still learning. And maybe, just maybe, they don't need to be warriors right away. Maybe they can learn strength in their own time when they're ready. You've taught them the importance of survival. I've shown them the importance of compassion. Isn't that enough for now?" Kalen looked at her, his chest tight with emotion. He hadn't expected her to understand. He hadn't expected her to speak so gently, so thoughtfully. But her words struck him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He had always been focused on strength, on survival. But Ilara had taught him something important, that there was more to life than just fighting. There was more to survival than just winning battles. "I don't know if I can let them stay here," Kalen said, his voice thick with doubt. "I don't know if I can trust that this is enough for them. I've always been taught that strength is the only thing that matters." Ilara placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "But they are learning strength, Kalen. They're learning it in their own way. They're learning it from both of us." Kalen's mind was racing. He had never thought of it that way before. He had always seen strength as something that had to be taught through combat, through survival. But now, he was beginning to see that there were other ways to teach strength. Ways that didn't involve violence. Ways that didn't involve battle. "I don't know what to do," Kalen whispered, his voice filled with uncertainty. Ilara gave him a small, understanding smile. "You don't have to know everything, Kalen. You don't have to have all the answers. What matters is that you're here, with them. You're giving them what they need, and that's more than enough." Kalen looked at her, his chest tight with emotion. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear those words. In that moment, something inside him shifted. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't need to follow the path that had always been laid out, for him. Maybe there was another way, a way that didn't involve abandoning the values he had been raised with, but instead finding a balance between them and the new life he had found here with Ilara and the hatchlings. "I'm scared," Kalen admitted quietly. "I'm scared of making the wrong decision." Ilara nodded, her gaze soft and understanding. "I think we all are, sometimes. But you don't have to make this decision alone, Kalen. We'll figure it out together." Kalen felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't carrying the burden alone. He wasn't just a warrior anymore. He was a father, a protector, and maybe, just maybe, he could learn to trust his heart as much as his instincts. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Kalen finally made his decision. He would take the hatchlings with him, but not to train them as soldiers, not yet. They would learn the ways of their people in time. But for now, they would stay with him, and they would learn the importance of both strength and compassion, of survival and kindness. And with Alara by his side, he knew they would be ready for whatever the future held. The morning sun shone through the thick canopy of trees, casting dappled light on the forest floor. Callan stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the hatchlings as they stretched their wings, testing them in the cool morning air. They had grown stronger, their bodies more agile, their wings more confident with every passing day. Callan had watched them closely, noting how they had developed not just physically, but emotionally. They were no longer the frightened, small creatures they had been when Alara had first found them. They had become more than just survivors. They had become learners. Alara was sitting nearby, her eyes following the hatchlings as they practiced flapping their wings. She smiled quietly to herself, the bond between them growing stronger each day. Kalen had come to realize that his fears had been misplaced. The hatchlings didn't need to be trained like soldiers, not yet at least. They needed time to grow, time to understand the world around them. And with Alara's help, he had learned that they could learn strength not only from their heritage but also from the kindness and patience she had shown them. Kalen looked down at the ground, his thoughts swirling. The decision he had made had been difficult, but in the end, it had been the right one. He had chosen to keep his hatchlings with him, but not in the way he had initially planned. He had chosen to raise them with both strength and compassion, to teach them the values that would serve them not just in battle but in life. They would learn the ways of their people, but they would also learn the importance of kindness, of understanding, of living with a sense of peace. Alara, Kalen said, his voice soft but firm. I've made my decision. She looked up from the hatchlings, her eyes warm and patient. What do you mean? I'm going to stay, Kalen said. With you, with the hatchlings. I'm going to raise them here in this forest, at least for now. They'll learn everything they need to know, but they'll also learn from you. Ilara's face lit up with a soft, surprised smile. You mean you're not going to take them back to your people? Kalen shook his head. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They don't need to be soldiers right now. They need to understand the world, to understand how to live in it. And I think with your help, they'll learn more than they would ever learn on the battlefield. For a moment, there was silence between them. The hatchlings continued to practice, their tiny wings flapping in unison, their chirps filling the air.